Don't cut the spider's thread. That's the only way to leave hell. Every cop has that one case seared into their memory. I was still in the police academy back then, just a college girl who hadn't seen much of the world, but I'd already encountered mine. That case brought me the deepest sorrow, fear, and shock. Even now, thinking back on it, I can't help but tremble. It happened in 2008. That summer, I went to a mountainous region for a volunteer teaching program. Before I talk about that experience, I need to give some background. When I was at the academy, I had a boyfriend, Henry. We were both criminology majors. He was 2 years ahead of me. We often studied and trained together, walked around campus, and talked about life and our dreams. Campus romances are sweet but often fleeting. Henry started working before I did, as a police officer in the local criminal investigation division. He was brilliant. His grades were top of the class, and after joining the force, he quickly made a name for himself, helping solve several homicides, kidnappings, and other major cases. He was even chosen as a representative for new recruits by the city police department and was interviewed for a local TV program. So, he was pretty well known around here. People would recognize him on the street. Isn't that Officer Henry from TV? You could say he was young, promising, and in his prime. In the summer of 2008, I was about to start my junior year, and Henry had been working for a year. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but Henry's police career, after a brief peak, came to an abrupt end. He suddenly quit. I asked him why, and he just said he didn't want to do it anymore. He wouldn't say anything specific. I asked his colleague, James. James said Henry might have been traumatized by a case, but he wasn't sure. When I asked what case, James said it was still under investigation and he couldn't disclose any details. I then asked Henry's mother, Helen. She didn't know either, just cried. And it wasn't just quitting. Henry's mental state became unstable. Helen told me that after he became unemployed, he'd sleep in late every day, always listless and out of it, like he was under a spell. She told him to see a doctor, but he refused. Helen was frantic, running around to hospitals, consulting doctors, and even pulling strings to get prescription drugs for him, but he wouldn't take them. Henry was like a different person, moping around all day. Besides eating and sleeping, he'd just go to internet cafes to play games, no different from some street punk. I wanted to have a serious talk with him, but I could never find him. So, every day after class, I'd go from one internet cafe to another, searching for him. The fifth time I found him at an internet cafe, he broke up with me. I demanded to know what had happened. He just waved his hand dismissively, his back to me, keyboard clattering away. The bright light from the game monitor on his face couldn't illuminate his gloomy expression. He had completely lost his former sunny disposition. The upperclassman I looked up to, the spirited Officer Henry from TV, the boyfriend who loved me deeply, it was like he was dead. I stood there, completely lost. It was Helen who pulled me out of the internet cafe. Helen took me out for a meal. The two of us poured out our hearts and cried. After dinner, Helen took off her gold necklace and gold earrings and insisted on giving them to me. She said her son was ruined and she couldn't bear to drag me down with him. That's when I realized it was a sort of breakup dinner. She said I could still get out, but she couldn't. In the end, I didn't take the jewelry, but we broke up anyway. Unilaterally. Helen had a government job. Later, she probably pulled some strings, greased some palms. After a month of messing around, Henry started working at his mom's office, a quiet desk job, just getting by. A promising young police officer, his career inexplicably nosedived. It was obvious something was fishy. I remembered last month, around July 5th, Henry said he was going to a mountainous area in a neighboring city called H-Town to investigate a case. He was fine back then. He was only there for a week. When he came back, everything had changed. There had to be something wrong with that mountain county. What on earth had Henry experienced there to become like this? I had to find out the truth. That was precisely why I decided to go to H-Town to volunteer as a teacher. H-Town was in a mountainous region of a neighboring city, a poor and remote little place. It was so small you couldn't even find it with an online search. James wouldn't tell me how to get there, but I managed to find out anyway. To avoid raising suspicion as a police academy student, I pretended to be a student from a regular liberal arts college and contacted the principal of elementary school in H-Town, Mr. Lewis, about a summer volunteer teaching position. When he heard I wanted to volunteer, he thanked me profusely over the phone. The night before I left, I scrolled through my phone, through all the unanswered calls and unread messages. Row after row, all under Henry's name. I tried calling one more time. The continuous busy tone, just as I expected. Maybe I had already given up hope. I just wanted the truth. I was about to hang up, but this time, it connected. "Henry, are you okay?" I asked quickly. Silence on the other end, just the sound of tired breathing. "What happened? Can't you tell me?" He remained silent. After a long, quiet standoff, I suddenly heard him say, out of the blue, "Don't cut the spider's thread." His voice was low and hoarse, his breath faint. He still didn't sound right. I was about to ask more, but he hung up. After all these days of worrying, all he left me with was a riddle. And his former colleague James sent me a text message, 7 concise words. "Break up with him. Stop investigating." At the time, I was so focused on finding the truth that I ignored James's warning. Looking back, going to H-Town was indeed the decision I regret most. On the morning of August 6, 2008, I packed my things and got on a bus heading to the neighboring city. From the city to the countryside, I changed buses 3 times. To get into the mountains, I switched to a minibus. After countless twists and turns, the world I knew was completely cut off. H-Town was remote, hidden deep in the old mountain forests, with only a single mountain road connecting it to the outside world. A narrow, 2-lane road stretched for nearly 200 kilometers, like some modern-day ancient trade route. As far as the eye could see, there were rolling mountains in every direction, covered in lush green vegetation, perfectly complemented by the blue sky and white clouds. In the daytime, it was truly beautiful scenery. The minibus drove for 5 hours on the mountain road. By the time we reached H-Town, it was completely dark, and the beautiful mountains and waters had taken on a different guise. Endless mountains, deep black, rising and falling like slumbering giants surrounding us. Mist filled the valleys, blurring everything, making it look eerie and terrifying. The county town was deserted, with few lights on, and the streets were blanketed in fog. The bus stopped by a battered road sign. The passengers scattered, quickly disappearing into the fog, and the street was empty again. I heard someone call out to me, "Nancy." A figure emerged from the fog. It was the principal, Mr. Lewis. Principal Lewis was very enthusiastic. He thanked me repeatedly, took my luggage, and asked after me all the way, lighting the path with a flashlight as we walked in the dark towards school. When we arrived at the school, we sat for a bit in the principal's office. Mr. Lewis poured me some water and gave me a rundown of the situation. He said conditions in H-Town were poor. Young teachers had come before in previous years, but none stayed for more than 6 months. Now, the school, including himself, had only 3 teachers, all locals. Each teacher wore multiple hats. He himself was the principal, as well as the language arts and PE teacher. I nodded, somewhat distractedly. My mind was preoccupied with Henry, with the case in H-Town, and with last night's spider's thread riddle. But I had just arrived. I couldn't ask questions rashly. For now, I was just a volunteer teacher. Mr. Lewis gave me a student roster, finalized the teaching plan, and then took me to the school dormitory to get settled. After a whole day of traveling, I was exhausted. I locked the door, unpacked my things, quickly washed up, and went to bed. Even in summer, the nights in the mountains were very cold. I pulled the blanket tight and quickly fell asleep. Just half an hour later, I woke up with a start. The room was pitch black. Outside, the mountains were silent. Cold air seeped in through the cracks in the window and door. The rickety wooden bed creaked, squeak, squeak. I sat up abruptly in the darkness. "Who's there?" I called out, extremely alert. It was too dark to see anything. But I felt eyes on me. Someone was in my room. Clutching my self-defense knife, I quickly rolled off the bed, took 2 or 3 steps to the door, and flicked on the light. The light wasn't very bright, but my eyes adjusted quickly. Looking around, I saw a small, dark, thin girl standing right by my bedside, pressed stiffly against the wall. So, when I was sitting on the bed just now, she was mere inches away from me. I felt a chill run down my spine. But she was just a little girl, probably a student at this elementary school. I put away the knife. "Who are you?" "Amy," she whispered. I recalled the student list Mr. Lewis had given me. There was a student named Amy. I told her I was the new teacher and sat her down on the bed to talk. Amy was shy and stammered when she spoke. I asked, "How did you get in?" She pointed to the window. "Why did you come into my room?" "Before, no one. It seemed she often hid here at night." I asked again, "Why don't you go home?" "Don't want to." "Why don't you want to go home?" She clammed up. I realized she had some unspoken hardship. "You can tell Nancy," I said. "Nancy will help you. We can even call the police." She mumbled, "Call the police." Seeing her strange expression, I quickly took out a photo of my boyfriend, Henry, from my bag and showed it to her. "Last month, did you see this young man?" Amy nodded. "A policeman. Do you know what he was doing here?" Do I have to say?" Amy asked cautiously. "Yes, you do." I gripped Amy's shoulders, my expression serious. "Amy, do you know something? Can you tell me?" Amy stared blankly for a moment, then suddenly burst into tears. Startled, I didn't know what to do for a moment, so I just held her and comforted her. After a while, she finally calmed down. I was about to try a more tactful approach when there was a knock on the door. "Nancy, is Amy with you? Her mother is looking for her." "Did she run over to your place?" It was Principal Lewis. I had no choice but to open the door. This child, always running around at night. What if something happens? "Mr. Lewis scolded. Then he greeted me, "Amy's always like this." "She didn't scare you, did she?" I shook my head. They then left. But after that, I couldn't sleep at all. Since I couldn't sleep well anyway, I went out early on the morning of August 7th. People here rose with the sun and rested at sunset. Once it was light, the county town had a bit more life, not as dead as last night. I walked around the streets, chatting with locals, subtly trying to gather information. But from their reactions, it seemed like nothing major had happened recently. Everything was normal. I found nothing, so I had to go back to the school. My class was in the morning. I taught math. There were 16 students in total, 1 absent, Amy. Last night, I took a risk by directly asking Amy if she knew something, which basically exposed my purpose. And from Amy's reaction, something definitely had happened. Today, I couldn't rashly ask anyone else. Since I'd started with Amy, the breakthrough would have to come from her. During break, I chatted with other students and got a basic understanding of Amy's family situation. Amy's family was quite poor. After her younger brother was born, Amy's father treated her very badly, often hitting and scolding her. He didn't even want her to finish elementary school, wanting her to stay home, help with chores, and take care of her brother. So, Amy didn't want to go home at night and hid in the school because she was afraid of her father. After the morning classes, I went to Amy's house, ostensibly as a new teacher making a home visit. Amy's mother was equally thin and frail, barely able to stand steadily, yet she held a plump, fair-skinned baby boy in her arms. It was her newborn son. She politely welcomed me in, got me a stool, poured me water, all while holding the child, never putting him down for a moment. I went over to coo at the baby and noticed the gold lock-shaped pendant around his neck was quite unique. Looking closer, it seemed to be from an expensive jeweler. Then I went into the inner room to see Amy. Amy's mother said Amy had caught a cold outside last night and had a fever today, which was why she didn't go to school. Really? I sat by Amy's bed and saw that even though she was wearing long sleeves, they couldn't hide the welts on her arms from being whipped. An 8-year-old girl, too scared to even go home. It was heartbreaking. Amy looked at me with tear-filled eyes, then suddenly remembered something, reached under her pillow, took something out, and quickly stuffed it into my hand. It was a wad of paper. Not long after, Amy's father returned. Tall and stout, with a fierce look on his face, just as Mr. Lewis had described, not a nice guy. He gave me a cold once-over. I couldn't stay long. Back in my dorm, I unfolded the paper. It was a simple drawing. On a palm-sized piece of homework paper, there was a tree and a crescent moon. Amy was trying to tell me something. This must be a scene she had witnessed. But the drawing was too simple. There was no shortage of trees in the mountains. How was I supposed to find the specific one she drew? I had to put it aside for now and go teach my afternoon class. In the afternoon, I taught art. I asked all the students to draw a picture of their most memorable scene. During math class in the morning, I noticed a girl named Emily seemed to have some intellectual disabilities, but now it looked like her drawing skills were decent. She drew two girls standing side by side, with the background completely blacked out. It was very visually striking. I asked her who she drew. She struggled for a long time but couldn't speak. Her intellectual disability also affected her language ability. Finally, she managed to say, "Me and Amy, punished." I asked, "Why were you punished?" Her face turned beet red, and she said no more. I thought Amy's simple drawing wouldn't be useful. Until evening, when I looked up and saw a crescent moon in the southern sky, and then I remembered the drawing. Today was August 7th, the moon is a first-quarter moon. Coincidentally, it was just like the one Amy drew. At that moment, I had a sudden flash of inspiration. If I thought about it carefully, the event Amy witnessed must have had a huge impact on her, so it would be deeply ingrained in her memory. Children have strong visual memories. She would clearly remember the scene. This drawing might seem simple, but it probably wasn't random. It should correspond to the actual scene she witnessed. I began to study the drawing carefully, trying to dig out some information. First, it was a first-quarter moon. A first-quarter moon only appears in the first half of the night, so Amy witnessed the event in the first half of the night. This made sense, she wouldn't be wandering around outside late at night. Second, the first-quarter moon appears on the 7th or 8th day of the lunar month. If what Amy witnessed was related to the case in H-Town, then it happened on the 7th or 8th day of last month, which would be July 9th or July 10th. At that time, Henry was in H-Town. Third, the first-quarter moon appears in the southern sky after sunset and gradually moves westward with celestial motion. The tree she drew was below the moon, so this tree was also to the south or southwest. Fourth, the tree in the drawing tilted to the right. Perhaps this also corresponded to the actual shape of the tree. Fifth, when Amy went out at night, it was most likely, as usual and like yesterday, because she didn't want to stay home and wanted to hide at the school. So, she must have seen something on her way to the school. Therefore, this tree should be located between Amy's home and school. Based on the information from this drawing, the possible area where this tree could be was significantly narrowed down. So, I needed to find a tree on Amy's route to school, located to the west or southwest, and tilted to the right. Worth a try. Before it got completely dark, I walked Amy's route to school and found 5 or 6 possible trees. Under one of them, the soil was a bit loose, as if it had been recently turned over. Very suspicious. I memorized the tree's location. When night fell and the roads were empty, I went out with a flashlight, found the tree, picked up a rock nearby, and started digging. After digging about 1.5 feet deep, a piece of fabric appeared. Looking closely, it was a t-shirt printed with a cartoon figure. And the person wearing this t-shirt, buried here, was already decomposed. Amy had witnessed a murder and the disposal of a body. A quick visual assessment suggested the body had been dead for about a month and was likely related to the H-Town case. I didn't dig the body out completely, only uncovering the clothes and an arm. Judging by the length and size of the arm, I knew the victim was a child. But from what I had seen and heard today, no child had gone missing in the county. For H-Town, it seemed like everything was normal. I realized that H-Town might have a child trafficking problem. T-shirts with that cartoon were fashionable and common in cities, but not something easily found in a remote mountainous area like H-Town. This child was most likely trafficked in from the city, not originally from here, so no one cared if they went missing. Including Amy's younger brother, whom I saw this morning. He looked nothing like Amy's family, and the expensive-looking gold pendant around his neck was also not something easily found here. This little son was most likely bought. This was within the realm of understanding. After all, cases of trafficked children ending up in remote mountainous areas were common, and the social impact was terrible. That's why last year, in 2007, a national anti-trafficking unit was established specifically to combat the trafficking of women and children. Trafficking, this inhumane evil, becomes even more vile and bloody in poorer, more isolated places. Once people are completely dominated by the desire to reproduce, they are no different from beasts. Perhaps the case in H-Town was related to trafficking. At this point, I thought I had touched upon the truth. Looking back, this case that terrified me for years was only just beginning. What I was sure of now was that a body was buried under this tree. But I couldn't make it known yet. I had to understand the whole picture before making any plans. So, I started to fill the dirt back in. Just then, I heard the faint, jumbled sounds of people's voices in the distance, and messy flashlight beams sweeping around. Quite a few locals were out with flashlights, seemingly looking for something. Normally, the locals, who rested at sunset, wouldn't be out at night, which is why I chose this time to come out. I didn't know what was happening, so I quickly turned off my flashlight and, fumbling in the darkness, rapidly filled the dirt back in, re-burying it. Then I took a detour in the dark, avoiding the main group of people, and returned to the school. It was 11 o'clock at night, time to sleep. I went back to my dorm without turning on the light and sat directly on the bed. There were still faint voices in the distance. Those locals were still searching. What on earth were they looking for? Could it be the child's body under the tree? Was I wrong? Was that child actually a local from H-Town, and the locals discovered he was missing, so they all came out to look for him? That didn't make sense. Whether looking at the time Amy witnessed it or the decomposition of the body, this child had been dead and buried under the tree for a month. How could it be that after a month, everyone suddenly realized he was missing? I'd have to go out later and see what was going on. I was thinking random thoughts, so agitated I couldn't help but punch the bed. Once, then again. On the third punch. Suddenly, my fist was gripped by a large hand. My heart almost stopped. Twice now, someone was in my room. This time, it was a man. I had a stress reaction, instinctively swinging a punch, but it hit empty air. Then I rolled off the bed, quickly retreated to the door, and turned on the light. The light suddenly brightened, and then I saw him clearly. It was Henry, in my room. It was terrifying, truly terrifying. My heart was racing, and I couldn't calm down. I was at the police academy, had received some training, and my mental fortitude was decent. If it had been any other girl, she might have been scared out of her wits. Henry stood under the fluorescent light, the white glare casting heavy shadows on his face. It had only been a few days since I last saw him, but he was a completely different person. He was thin, his face somber, his eyes bloodshot, staring straight at me without blinking, making me extremely uncomfortable. I couldn't connect him with the boyfriend in my memories at all. "What are you doing here?" I looked away, my tone a bit stiff. I said, "Didn't we break up?" He fell silent, looking at me with some bewilderment, then after a moment, seemed to remember. Only then did I realize his mental state was still not normal. His demeanor, his tone, his gaze, none of it was normal. At this moment, I truly became afraid. This man before me, I both loved and feared him. How could human emotions be so complex? I had clearly come to H-Town for him, but now I didn't want to see him at all. I could no longer be in the same room with him comfortably. Perhaps now, I really just wanted the truth. I pressed myself against the door, my hand behind my back, tightly gripping the doorknob. I wanted to open the door and escape, but where could I escape to? My dorm was the only sanctuary I had. "Henry, please leave, okay?" I carefully negotiated with him, my voice trembling. He looked at me, not speaking. Another silent standoff. Time ticked by, second by second. My legs were so weak I almost knelt. He nodded. I turned the doorknob and opened the door for him. He walked out. I immediately closed and locked the door. The window couldn't be locked, so I found a long ruler in the room, propped it against the window frame, and pulled the curtains tightly shut. After doing all this, I was already drenched in a cold sweat. I never thought Henry and I would reach this point. I recalled James's text message from 2 days ago, "Break up with him. Stop investigating." At that time, I wouldn't listen to any attempts to stop me. Now, I suddenly wondered why James also advised me to break up with him. I took out my phone and replied to James. I asked him, why? His answer was still concise: "Henry has problems." Yes, I had that feeling too. Henry wasn't just traumatized, he seemed to have other issues. I called James, pressing him about what was really going on with Henry. James hesitated for a long time, but he finally spoke. He still didn't mention the H-Town case, but he revealed a hidden side of Henry. James said that when Henry came to H-Town last time, he had acted inappropriately towards 2 children at school, Amy and Emily. Principal Lewis reported this to them after Henry left. The department took it very seriously and immediately asked Henry if it was true. Henry admitted it. Fortunately, it was minor inappropriate behavior. The children in the mountains were innocent and didn't understand, so it didn't cause any serious consequences or psychological trauma. But an incident like this would affect Henry's future. Henry had been on TV and received commendations. He had a certain reputation locally. This matter couldn't be publicized. So the department just had a few private talks with him, hoping he would get back on the right track. Who knew that after the scandal was exposed, Henry just gave up, took the initiative to resign, and from then on, became disheartened and let himself go. I listened in a daze, not sure when I hung up the phone. Once the verdict was in, many previous details seemed to have different explanations. Henry had volunteered at remote elementary schools before and had also been a volunteer at an orphanage. I always thought he was a very caring person. Could it be that he did those good deeds to satisfy his own shameful tendencies? Was it because those poor, love-deprived children were easy to manipulate? Perhaps the more sunny and upright a person appears on the surface, the darker and filthier they are underneath. We had been together for 2 years, and I never imagined Henry would have such a disgusting habit. Just now, he had appeared in my room. I shivered, checked the door and windows again, and didn't dare turn off the light. I thought I would find Amy and Emily tomorrow and try to subtly ask them about it. Speaking of which, I had never told anyone I was coming to H-Town to volunteer teach. How did Henry find me? I instantly broke out in a cold sweat. It was a long night. A heavy rainstorm started. I heard many people walking around outside, noisy and indistinct, as if their voices were coming from a dream. On the morning of August 8th, the rain stopped. I asked around and found out that last night, they were looking for Amy. I had just seen her yesterday during the day, and by nightfall, she was missing. Why? Did she sneak out of the house again at night? That night, Principal Lewis had said, a child that young, always running around at night. What if something happens? Now, his words had come true. Someone said the last time they saw Amy, she was with a young man. He described the man's build and features. An image of a person floated into my mind. Amy went missing last night, and Henry appeared last night. I didn't dare think about it anymore. I just wanted to find Amy. Last night, people searched for several hours. Because it was too dark and raining, they eventually stopped. Today, the search continued. I joined them, climbing the nearby mountains, searching every corner of the county town, calling Amy's name. Other than the echo from the valley, there was no answer. Soon it was dark again, still no sign of her. Exhausted, I walked through the streets of the county town and saw a restaurant with a TV on, broadcasting a major national channel. I was crushed, unable to breathe, but I couldn't look away. When the last footprint completed its journey, it felt like the road had reached its end. Just then. Found her. Found her. I heard someone shout. After a day and a night, she was finally found. But to be precise, only half of her was found. Amy lay in a very hidden pit under a cliff. Her eyes were wide open, her clothes disheveled, her body covered in injuries. She had been dead for a long time. And, in the pit, there was only her upper body, not her lower half. Her waist was cleanly severed, definitely not the work of wild animals in the mountains. My heart ached beyond words. The moment I saw the body, I knew what she had experienced before she died. Beaten, abused, brutally murdered, cut in half at the waist, what kind of monster would do this to an 8-year-old child? I remembered again, last night Amy went missing, and Henry appeared. Someone asked Amy's father if he wanted to call the police. Amy's father looked at the new injuries layered over old ones on Amy's body and hesitated. But Amy's mother finally put down the baby boy she was holding and rushed forward, crying, "This is our own daughter." In the end, they decided not to call the police. However, since Amy always hid at the school at night, the school bore some responsibility and had to pay compensation. I suddenly realized I couldn't analyze the events in this small county town with conventional values. In these isolated deep mountain forests, many evils were simply buried and forgotten. The child dumped under the tree was one, and Amy was another. They didn't care who was truly responsible for this. I stepped back. Glancing up, I saw that familiar yet alien figure standing by a distant tree. When Henry realized I had noticed him, he retreated, disappearing into the night. The locals had agreed not to call the police, but I did. This also meant I couldn't stay here much longer. Amy's lower body still hadn't been found. Before the police could even get up the mountain, a second girl went missing. It was Emily. The girl with intellectual disabilities who was a good artist. She and Amy had both been molested by Henry. This connection made me despair. Was he trying to destroy evidence? Destroying evidence was one thing, but why use such cruel methods? He was no longer the kind, upright police officer I remembered. Calling him a demon wouldn't be an exaggeration. With Amy's case as a precedent, Emily's parents were frantic, crying and begging everyone for help to find her. People dared not rest and threw themselves into the next wave of searching. On the morning of August 9th, after the police arrived on the mountain, they quickly investigated the scene where Amy was killed. But the rain last night had been too heavy, they couldn't expect much to be left. Amy's partial remains hadn't even been hastily buried yet the police transported her down the mountain back to the station. At the same time, the police also dispatched personnel to help search for Emily. My reporting the crime naturally came to light. For safety reasons, my subsequent actions had to be coordinated with the police. The search for Emily was equally difficult. The mountainous terrain was complex, and the county town had no surveillance cameras. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, with no breakthroughs. On the evening of August 9th, I saw Henry's furtive figure again. He was walking very fast, as if he was going somewhere. At that moment, my anger reached its peak. I ran directly towards him. 2 police officers saw this and followed me. We left the main group and chased Henry up a mountain. Dense forest surrounded us, and the dark red sunset light struggled to penetrate. The sky grew darker, making tracking difficult under such conditions. In a blink, the figure ahead disappeared. We lost him. We had to slow down and cautiously search in the likely direction. Like headless flies, we wandered around this mountain for over an hour. It was almost dark. At one point, there was a slight noise nearby. I followed the sound and heard crying. It was Emily. She was alive, but running a high fever. Her body also showed signs of being beaten and abused. She was crying and talking nonsense in her nightmare, repeatedly mentioning a term. It was mumbled and unclear, I didn't understand it. Henry had disappeared again. He probably realized we were following him and hadn't had time to act. So now, Emily, the survivor, became the most important witness. After rescuing Emily, the police immediately asked me who I was chasing. I hesitated for a moment, then gave them Henry's name. It felt like I had made a major life decision. I had completely given up on Henry. I showed them Henry's photo, and a local man shouted, "That's him." The last time I saw Amy, she was with this man. With sufficient motive and opportunity, as well as an eyewitness, although the evidence was still insufficient, it was basically certain that Henry was a suspect. The police sealed off the county town and screened suspicious individuals. After 2 days of searching, they didn't find him. They said it was sealed off, but the terrain here made it difficult to truly secure. Henry had already left. The police took Emily back to the station, and I went down the mountain with them, leaving this county town. At this point, I thought I knew the truth. All that was needed was for Emily to wake up, for Amy's body to be examined, to complete the chain of evidence, and then an arrest would be made. But at that time, I forgot a very important point: Amy's lower body still hadn't been found. Most of what happened next, James told me after the case was closed. After leaving the county, the police immediately opened an investigation. First, Amy. Amy's cause of death was asphyxiation, but she was cut in half at the waist after death. Why the killer did this, and why the upper and lower body parts were in different places, were points of suspicion. It rained heavily the night Amy was killed, and she wasn't found for another day, so her body was very clean, with almost no effective suspect hair, skin cells, or bodily fluids. The dismemberment wound was caused by a common local wood-chopping axe. The murder weapon was not found. The police sent a team to continue searching H-Town for the other half of Amy's body and the murder weapon. In short, regarding Amy, no direct evidence was found for now. Next, Emily. Emily was immediately sent to a child rehabilitation center for treatment. As a survivor, she should have provided effective testimony. But she was only 8 years old and had suffered immense psychological trauma after the assault. She was almost non-verbal, only repeatedly uttering a baffling term. There were no temples in H-Town. When they asked the child's parents, they were also clueless. It would take some time for Emily to regain her senses. Even the doctors couldn't say for sure. They couldn't rush this, couldn't risk making the child's condition worse just to investigate the case. So, regarding Emily, there was also no direct evidence for now. Besides, there was Henry, the prime suspect. A month ago, Henry was accused of molesting 2 girls. Everyone in the CID could testify to this, and Henry himself had admitted it at the time, even ruining his police career because of it. A month later, these 2 girls were found, one dead, one injured. Henry was present in H-Town at the time of the incidents, his movements secretive and suspicious, with no alibi. The police forces of the 2 cities collaborated, and Henry's former CID unit also participated in the case. The day after Henry fled home, James brought people to his house. Helen was stunned at first, then desperately tried to block them, crying and screaming not to arrest him. James explained it was a summons for questioning, but everyone knew in their hearts that an arrest was inevitable. So, they took away their former colleague. The police wanted to use Henry's confession to find Amy's lower body and the murder weapon, completing the evidence chain. But no matter how they interrogated him, Henry remained silent from beginning to end, as if he knew the police lacked sufficient evidence. Henry had been a detective. He knew all about interrogation techniques. Now, as a suspect, he wasn't going to cooperate easily. He neither cooperated with the investigation nor defended himself. No matter what, he kept his eyes downcast and said nothing. He even, defiantly, refused to eat, like some kind of silent protest. This went on for 2 days. He still refused to eat, his body weakening rapidly. His mental state also worsened, and he even showed symptoms of schizophrenia. The police had no choice but to send him to the hospital. As they were escorting him out of the police station, a crowd had gathered outside. Is that the pervert cop from TV? He looks human, but he does the work of an animal. So disgusting. Death penalty. The crowd was noisy and chaotic, picking up stones and throwing their shoes at him. Crowds are easily swayed. Someone had leaked the news, and public opinion had fermented like this. Henry had been on TV and had some fame. When something like this happened, it instantly became a huge scandal, and major newspapers swarmed in. A once promising, outstanding police academy graduate suddenly became a pedophile and even a perverted murderer, reduced to a prisoner. Everyone was shocked by such a stark contrast. In 2008, the internet wasn't as widespread as it is now, but at least in our city, Henry's case caused a massive uproar. Hearing those ugly, insulting words, I felt a sense of disconnection. In H-Town, everything had happened too fast. I hadn't had time to think much, and was forced to accept a lot of information. Now that the case was in police hands, I couldn't access case details. I gradually calmed down and had more time to think. Honestly, in the 2 years I was with Henry, a time neither long nor short, was the Henry the first remembered really that despicable? I thought I had completely given up on Henry, that I could watch him be brought to justice without emotion. But these past few days, I've been dreaming frequently. All my dreams were of time spent with Henry. We studied together in the library, trained together on the practice field, talked about life, ideals, crime, human rights. He was originally such an upright, intelligent, and cheerful person. How good at pretending must a person be to show no cracks in their facade for years? Everything that had happened in these 2 months, perhaps it wasn't as simple as it appeared on the surface. But where did the problem lie? I had a premonition that if I didn't find the truth soon, it would be too late. Helen had already found an experienced lawyer for him. The chances of winning the case were very high. And the police investigation had basically stalled. Amy's lower body still hadn't been found, and Emily's mental state hadn't recovered. Henry had been hospitalized for 2 days, kept alive by 4 drips, still stubbornly refusing to eat, drink, or speak. If you don't erupt in silence, you perish in silence. I went to the hospital every day, standing under the inpatient building, looking at a certain window on the 9th floor. Sometimes I would see him at the window. From afar, I couldn't make out his expression. It seemed like he was looking at me too. Had our distance really become so great? On the evening of August 14th, I went to the hospital again. The ground floor of the inpatient building was, as usual, crowded with a few of our police academy classmates. We couldn't go up to visit, so everyone was keeping Helen company on the ground floor. Compared to a month ago, Helen had aged considerably. Looking at her, I felt like something was missing from her. Was it her spirit? No, it wasn't something so abstract. It had to be something more concrete. A strange feeling began to rise within me. I felt like I had overlooked something. Helen said to everyone, "Henry is a good boy, the best boy in the world." I said nothing, just looked at her, my mind replaying the events of this period. The last time I saw Helen, she took me for that breakup dinner, saying her son was ruined and she didn't want to hold me back. This time, she said her son was the best boy in the world. Her expression was similar, but the words were completely different. A month apart, two images overlapped. I think I knew what was missing from Helen. The next second, all the blood rushed to my head, and a flood of chaotic images filled my brain. A white light flashed in my mind, and I almost lost the ability to think. Just then, a scream erupted from outside the inpatient building. Someone jumped. Someone jumped from the building. Police tape went up, crowds bustled, the long night was clamorous. Next to the inpatient building, a dumpster was overturned, its contents, blindingly white medical waste, scattered everywhere. Henry was bare-chested, his entire face buried in the medical waste, half of it smeared with unknown filth and urine. Blood spread from the back of his head. He was already dead. Helen, ignoring the restraints, threw herself onto her son's body, sobbing uncontrollably. I took one look, then stepped back, and back again. "Why, Henry, why did it turn out like this?" I muttered to myself. Tears streamed down my face. From the very beginning, I was wrong. The point of the fall was the men's restroom on the 9th floor of the inpatient building. At that time, it was during the shift change for the on-duty police. Henry went to the men's restroom alone around 9:25 p.m. and then fell from the restroom window around 9:35 p.m. According to the doctor, Henry had been emotionally stable and lucid today. The 9th floor men's restroom was in chaos, with extensive signs of a struggle. Henry's hospital gown top, blue and white striped, was on the floor, stained with grayish-yellow grime. There were drag marks around the clothes, as if they had been used to wipe away footprints. The signs of a struggle at the scene were obvious clearly, a second person had been present. Henry's body was taken back to the police station overnight for an autopsy. On the morning of August 15th, the police obtained the hospital surveillance footage and began screening for suspicious individuals. However, they found that apart from Henry, no one had entered or exited the men's restroom around 9:30 p.m. last night. Pushing back a day further, no one had loitered in the men's restroom either. The incident occurred on the 9th floor, and the building facade was straight, making entry through a broken window impossible. Therefore, no one had the opportunity to commit the crime. There were no suspicious individuals. Or rather, there was no murderer at all. From beginning to end, only Henry himself was the most suspicious. If Henry had committed suicide out of guilt, it would be plausible. But why would he go to such lengths to stage his suicide scene as a murder scene? The forensic pathologist found the answer after the autopsy. The pathologist discovered dense red patches on Henry's upper abdomen, looking like bruises from being grabbed. Upon pressing the abdominal cavity, they sensed something unusual and decided to perform an autopsy. Ultimately, the pathologist found a plastic bag in Henry's abdominal cavity. When dissected, this indigestible object was lodged between his stomach and duodenum, undoubtedly causing immense pain while he was alive. Henry hadn't been eating, not out of some defiant silent protest, but because a few days earlier, he had swallowed this plastic bag, and the pain made it impossible for him to eat. Henry committed suicide. He was my direct upperclassman, an outstanding graduate of the criminology department. He knew how to stage a murder scene. Signs of a struggle could be faked, and injuries from a struggle could be self-inflicted by hitting blunt objects. He even lay on the men's restroom floor to get urine on his face. This evidence of a non-natural death didn't need to be overly convincing, just enough to deceive the police during the initial scene examination. He needed to commit suicide. But if the police confirmed it as suicide at the scene, his body would be sent directly to the funeral home, which was not his goal. His goal was to make his death suspicious enough that his body would be taken to the station for an autopsy, ultimately allowing the pathologist to find the secret he had hidden in his stomach. He hadn't intentionally refused to confess while alive. He had something to say, but only after death. Everything was too late, and everything also fell into place. I took a photo of Helen to the Child Rehabilitation Center and showed it to Emily. As expected, the moment Emily saw Helen, she immediately started crying hysterically. I felt guilty for upsetting Emily, but it was indeed the quickest way to verify. On the evening of August 15th, there was also a major development in H-Town. Lewis went out late at night with several people, carrying shovels, to dig a pit in a valley. This desperate act was so reckless that it was hard for it not to attract the attention of the police investigation team in H-Town. Henry's death seemed to have turned a crucial gear. All stalled work began to progress. As the investigation unfolded further, a twisted and sorrowful story gradually came to light. There was one thing I got right. The case in H-Town was indeed a trafficking case. The child's body under the tree, Amy's younger brother, they were all trafficked children. There were other children, in places I couldn't see. It was an operation similar in scale to school. It was as if there were two schools, one in the open, one in the shadows. Let's rewind to the very beginning. What turning point might occur in the life of a woman who has relied on child trafficking for many years? In the winter of 1985, Helen came into possession of a baby boy. She was originally going to sell him, but suddenly had a pang of conscience, a moment of pity. She liked the child, adopted him, and named him Henry. She resolved, for the child's sake, to leave her dark past behind, stop committing crimes, and find legitimate work. She tried several jobs before finally settling into a position at the family planning office. Unfortunately, the stability didn't last long. The family planning office job was stable, but the pay was meager. To give her child a better life, a better education, she needed more money. And her old ways were the fastest way to make money. That fleeting moment of kindness back then was indeed just fleeting. It didn't pull her out of the mire. Now, with some authority in the family planning office, it was actually more conducive to her criminal activities. In 1992, Helen returned to her old trade, colluding with Lewis to set up a secret location in the remote mountainous H-Town as a transit station for trafficked children. The locals in H-Town benefited from this black market industry and collectively guarded this secret. Helen made a lot of money from trafficking, using her tainted hands to lift a clean child out of the mud. This child, under his mother's protection, grew up affluent and carefree. He had an innate sense of justice, dedicated to upholding righteousness and benefiting the people. He got into the police academy with excellent grades. He was sunny, cheerful, upright, and kind. He volunteered at orphanages and taught in mountainous regions. These experiences made him despise child abandonment and trafficking. On July 5, 2008, Henry, tracking a trafficker, followed the trail to H-Town. But in this remote, isolated mountain county, mother and son unexpectedly met. Helen didn't oppose her son becoming a police officer. She thought having a cop as an inside contact would facilitate her work. She planned to tell Henry everything at an opportune moment. Since they had met unexpectedly, she figured now was as good a time as any. But this upright young police officer couldn't tolerate a speck of injustice. His worldview collapsed. He had always pursued justice, only to suddenly discover that his own justice was tainted. For over 20 years, everything he owned was supported by dirty money from child trafficking. He had climbed up on the tears and blood of countless trafficked children to achieve his bright ambitions and become a police officer. For someone who grew up like this, his job, ironically, was to investigate child trafficking cases. His life was absurdly comical. On July 9, 2008, Henry witnessed Helen murder someone and dispose of the body. A 5-year-old boy escaped from the transit station and accidentally broke his leg. Even if caught, he wouldn't fetch a good price. Helen, in a fit of rage, snapped the boy's neck and buried him on the spot. This process was also witnessed by 7-year-old Amy. Henry couldn't accept this reality. He urged his mother to turn herself in. His mother berated him for being heartless, saying she had become completely corrupted raising him, yet he wanted her dead. She had Lewis force 2 local children to recite lines accusing Henry of inappropriate behavior with children, reporting it directly to his department as a threat and a warning. Henry didn't give in, nor did he argue. He chose to resign directly. It wasn't because he couldn't bear the humiliation, but because in H-Town, he had let Helen go, and he no longer had the face to be a police officer. He broke up with me, ruthlessly. Because he couldn't escape, but I could. After that, it was a long tug of war between him and his mother, alone. Actually, I misunderstood many things. I thought Henry had mental problems, so his mother tried to get prescription drugs to treat him. In reality, his mother obtained antipsychotic drugs like Risperdal, adding them to Henry's food daily to impair his mental state, making him lethargic and listless, to achieve mental control and make it easier to brainwash her son into colluding with her. I thought after Henry resigned, he went to work as an admin at his mother's office because she pulled strings. In reality, Henry wanted to better monitor and restrain his mother, so he found a way to get in himself. I knew nothing about all this. I went to H-Town. On my first night in H-Town, Lewis was planning to drug me and sell me to a local man as a wife. But in the principal's office, I didn't drink his water. Late at night, Lewis came to my dorm room, intending to act again, but he overheard my conversation with Amy. After learning my true intentions, he didn't dare act rashly and informed Helen the next morning. Henry found out I had walked into the lion's den because he overheard Helen talking to Lewis on the phone. So, he immediately went to H-Town. Before leaving, he told Helen that if she didn't turn herself in, he would report her. Helen also followed him to H-Town. Meanwhile, Lewis received 2 instructions. One was to silence the 2 girls who knew, framing Henry, who was about to arrive in H-Town. The other was to kill me. That night, when Henry appeared in my room, I was terrified. I didn't know he was there to protect me. I kicked him out. He stayed outside my door, guarding me all night. That night, outside my door, he heard me talking to James on the phone, saying he had mental problems, saying he was a perverted pedophile. For the next 2 days, wherever I went, he always lingered not too far away, until the police came up the mountain. He could do nothing about Amy, he could only try to save Emily. The time I was chasing him, he was actually tracking Helen. In the end, Helen didn't get to harm Emily. Henry had already led me and 2 police officers there. Next, the 2 most important questions. First, why was Amy cut in half, with her upper and lower body parts in different places? Because the lower body contained direct evidence of Henry's crime. Helen knew that Henry had a problem since childhood. If he took anti-inflammatory drugs, he was prone to nocturnal emissions. From the moment Henry urged her to turn herself in, she had a plan to counter him. One night, she not only gave Henry psychiatric drugs but also an overdose of anti-inflammatory drugs, which severely damaged Henry's central nervous system. She collected her son's semen, preserved it at low temperature, for later use. In H-Town, Helen smeared Henry's semen on Amy's lower body and hid it. If Henry was determined to destroy her, she would let the police find Amy's lower body and drag him down with her. If Henry chose to compromise and not pursue the matter, Amy's lower body would never be found. She would hire the best lawyer to help Henry get acquitted. The ideal path, naturally, was the second one. She spread rumors, used public opinion to create pressure, also to force Henry to choose the second path for the sake of his reputation. Henry refused to confess for days. She thought Henry had compromised. She never expected Henry to commit suicide. Second, what was the plastic bag taken from Henry's stomach? When Emily was in trouble in the cave, running a high fever and talking deliriously, she kept crying out. Helen didn't hear it when she left, but Henry, who followed closely behind, did. He knew that others would eventually hear it too. Helen always wore a pair of gold earrings, but later she stopped wearing them. This was also why I felt something was missing when I saw Helen again. That day when James and others came to her door, Helen had just finished showering. Her gold earrings were taken off and placed on the table, not yet put back on. Helen didn't know about the incident, but Henry knew, and the police knew. Henry had always urged his mother to turn herself in, but when the police really came to the door, he instinctively wanted to protect his mother. In his desperation, he wrapped the earrings in a plastic bag and swallowed them, and from then on, he was so tormented by the pain of swallowing gold that he never ate again. A child's love for their mother is pure and profound. Children themselves often don't realize how deep this love is. His life was given by his mother. His mother worked hard to raise him. A grateful child should not harm their mother. He urged his mother to turn herself in, threatened to disown her for the sake of justice, but in the end, he couldn't bring himself to confess her crimes, couldn't bear to send her to court himself. He had been waiting for his mother to come to her senses. For 2 months, no matter what methods his mother used, he silently endured. This time, he knew it was the final moment. On the evening of August 14th, Henry first returned his life to Helen, and then he exposed her. He would share life and death with her. He had already taken the first step. In the interrogation room, Helen, learning the truth, cried incessantly, "He was completely disappointed in me, he gave up on me. More than 20 years ago, the first time I saw him, I thought he was a godlike, good child. He was abandoned back then, and ended up in my hands. I had already contacted a buyer the day before, but when I saw him, I hesitated. Such a cute little baby, how could his birth mother bear to abandon him? He had big eyes, looked at me and giggled, and reached out to grab my earring. At that moment, I felt a divine message. God had sent him to me, to save me from the abyss of sin. I wanted to be a good person, but I failed. I raised my child to be an excellent person, only to destroy him with my own hands. He was a good child, but I was not a good mother." Helen confessed. Years later, while tidying my study, I stumbled upon Henry's college notebook and saw a passage he had written. Ryunosuke Akutagawa's short story The Spider's Thread tells this tale. An evil man dies and is cast into hell, suffering endless torment. Buddha discovers that this evil man, though he committed murder, arson, and all sorts of wicked deeds in life, had one instance of kindness: he spared a spider. Buddha, intending to save him, lowered a single strand of spider silk from heaven to hell. The evil man grabbed the silk and began to climb. Looking back, he saw all the denizens of hell climbing after him. Fearing the thread couldn't bear the weight, he angrily kicked those below him off. Instantly, the thread broke, and he fell back into hell. The spider's thread is a sliver of good. Cherish that fleeting good thought. It is tiny but resilient, strong enough to pull a lost soul back to the right path. Of course, it is also very fragile. Don't cut the spider's thread. Seeing these words, I felt like I saw again that bright, sunny boy from college. He was very knowledgeable, very smart, but I hadn't read that book and didn't grasp his deeper meaning at the time. Campus romances are sweet but often fleeting. Henry started working before I did, as a police officer in the local criminal investigation division. All in this was the case that left the deepest impression on me, and it's the story of my boyfriend, Henry. I once thought my feelings for Henry had been worn away by countless rejections and suspicions. I thought all I cared about was the truth. But the moment I knew the truth, I could never forget him. Later, I often thought, if I hadn't gone to H-Town, Henry wouldn't have come looking for me, and Amy and Emily wouldn't have suffered. But even so, would the outcome have been any different? Thinking back now, the thing I regret most in my life wasn't going to H-Town. It was that night, when I kicked him out of my room. I didn't look at him a few more times, didn't say a few more words to him. To know that after that night, we would never have another chance.